Around 1200 BCE, nearly every major civilization in the Mediterranean and Near East collapsed. Not one empire, not two, almost all of them, within roughly the same 50-year window. Historians call it the Late Bronze Age collapse, and it's one of the strangest mysteries in ancient history. Picture the world right before this happened: the Egyptian New Kingdom, the Hittite Empire, Mycenaean Greece, the city of Ugarit, trading networks stretching from Greece to Mesopotamia to Egypt, moving goods, ideas, and writing across thousands of miles. This wasn't a scattered collection of tribes. This was an interconnected, advanced world. Then, within a few decades, most of it simply stopped existing. The Hittite Empire, one of the most powerful civilizations on Earth at the time, vanished almost entirely. Their capital, Hattusa, was burned and abandoned. Mycenaean Greece, home to the world of Homer's legends, collapsed so completely that Greece entered what historians literally call a dark age, lasting for centuries. Writing itself disappeared from the region for hundreds of years. Let that sink in. An entire civilization forgot how to write. So what actually caused this? For decades, the leading suspect was a mysterious group called the Sea Peoples. Egyptian records describe waves of unknown raiders attacking by land and sea, overwhelming cities that had stood for centuries. Pharaoh Ramesses III even recorded a massive battle against them around 1175 BCE, claiming victory. But even after that victory, Egypt itself never fully recovered its former power. Nobody still knows exactly who the Sea Peoples actually were. Some theories suggest displaced Greeks. Others suggest groups from Sardinia, Sicily, or Anatolia. Entire migrating populations, possibly refugees themselves, fleeing something even worse happening elsewhere. But here's where it gets more complicated. Invaders alone don't usually take down an entire interconnected civilization system. So researchers started looking deeper. Climate data changed everything. Studies of ancient pollen, sediment layers, and tree rings across the region point to a severe, prolonged drought hitting right around this exact time period. Some estimates suggest parts of the eastern Mediterranean experienced drought conditions lasting decades, not years. Decades of failed harvests, across multiple civilizations, all interconnected, all dependent on trade to survive. Because here's the thing people often miss. These civilizations weren't self-sufficient islands. They were part of one of the first known global trade networks in human history. Tin from Central Asia, copper from Cyprus, grain from Egypt, timber from the Levant. Everyone depended on everyone else, constantly, just to keep their bronze weapons, tools, and economies functioning. So when drought hit multiple regions simultaneously, it didn't just damage local farming. It broke the entire supply chain holding this ancient world together. Add earthquakes into the mix. Archaeological evidence shows a cluster of major earthquakes striking multiple cities across the region during roughly the same window. Some researchers call this pattern an earthquake storm, a series of major quakes triggering each other across fault lines over a period of decades. So now you've got drought crushing food supplies, trade routes collapsing under pressure, and earthquakes physically destroying major cities. All at once, all interconnected. And that's when the Sea Peoples show up in the records, right in the middle of everything else falling apart. This is where modern historians landed on something called systems collapse theory. Instead of one single cause, multiple crises hit simultaneously, and because these civilizations were so tightly interconnected through trade, a crisis in one region rippled outward and destabilized everyone connected to it. Think of it like dominoes, except every domino was also holding up several others at the same time. Drought weakens Egypt's grain production. Grain shortages destabilize trade partners depending on Egyptian exports. Trade collapse triggers economic crisis in regions relying on tin and copper for bronze production. Economic crisis weakens military strength. Weakened militaries can't defend against opportunistic raiders or desperate refugee populations fleeing their own collapsing regions. Everything triggers everything else. Here's what's genuinely unsettling about this. individually, none of these events were necessarily civilization-ending. Droughts had happened before. Earthquakes had happened before. Raiders had appeared before. Civilizations had always found ways to recover. But this time, everything hit together, across an entire interconnected system, faster than anyone could adapt or recover. Some civilizations barely survived, permanently smaller and weaker than before. Others, like the Hittites, essentially disappeared from history altogether. Egypt survived, but never fully returned to its former power, entering a long, slow period of decline afterward. And the truly strange part? For a while, almost nobody understood what had actually happened. Later civilizations, including the Greeks themselves, looked back at their own ancestors' ruins with genuine confusion, sometimes assuming legendary heroes or giants must have built these massive structures, because they couldn't imagine ordinary humans from their own collapsed society achieving something that advanced. Their own history became a mystery to them. It took modern archaeology, climate science, and seismology, working together across multiple disciplines, just to begin piecing together what actually happened over 3,000 years later. Here's the part that I think about the most. This wasn't some primitive, isolated society falling apart from a single, simple cause. This was one of the most advanced, interconnected civilizations of its era, brought down partly by the exact same thing that made it so powerful in the first place: interconnection. The very trade networks that made these civilizations thrive also made them fragile, because a crisis anywhere could eventually become a crisis everywhere. That pattern doesn't feel quite as ancient as you'd think. If uncovering the hidden science behind stories like this fascinates you, there's a lot more of it here.